"Daddy, the little girl in the trunk is asking you to let her out. Our 4-year-old daughter's innocent, yet profoundly unsettling declaration pierced the serene bubble of our family road trip. The words seemed to hang in the air, casting an eerie shadow over our otherwise peaceful drive. As soon as those chilling words escaped her lips, I instinctively turned to look at my husband, Freddie. His reaction was immediate, and striking, his face drained of color. A blend of sheer panic and bewilderment etched into his features. His gaze flickered nervously towards the rearview mirror, where it met the inquisitive eyes of our daughter. The sheer terror that was reflected in his eyes was palpable, suggesting that a hidden truth was on the verge of being exposed. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. The profound discomfort that her statement evoked sent a cold shiver racing down my spine. It was almost impossible to fathom that such a disturbing scenario could spring from the innocent imagination of a child. From my seat in the passenger side, I shot Freddie a look so intense that it could have seared through steel. My eyes were a silent storm of anxiety and reproach, conveying a potent mix of worry and silent accusation that words alone could scarcely express. Amid this harrowing moment, a thought flashed through my mind: should we pull over at the next rest area? It struck me how our 5-year marriage had been a journey of unwavering support and sacrifice on my part, especially as Freddie navigated the demands of his high-pressure career. Now, it seemed that our daughter's seemingly supernatural insight was about to lay bare some hidden truth. I am Charlotte Clark, who wed Freddie at 27, with him being 4 years older and immersed in his relentless professional world. Our daughter, Sophia, who arrived the following year, had grown into a vivacious and spirited 4-year-old. Our lives had been a whirlwind of both chaos and joy. As I grappled with the unsettling revelation, I sought solace in something more cheerful. "How about a trip to the zoo next Sunday?" I suggested, hoping to steer our minds away from the dark cloud that had momentarily enveloped us. Sophia's eyes sparkled with delight, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "Yay! I want to see the giraffes." In that fleeting moment of shared excitement, I clung to the hope that this burst of joy might offer a brief respite from the unnerving mystery that loomed ominously over us. I couldn't help but smile as I observed their joyful interaction. My husband, Freddie, has always been a beacon of kindness, from the early days of our relationship right through to our married life and the arrival of our daughter. His unwavering dedication to family life was evident in how he eagerly participated in our shared activities on his days off and how he excelled as a father. I felt a deep sense of gratitude and contentment as I watched him and our daughter, Sophia, laughing and playing together. In those moments, it was hard to imagine anything disrupting our tranquil, happy life. Yet, fate had other plans. "What do you mean you're being transferred to a different department?" I asked with a growing sense of concern. Freddie's weary sigh and downcast eyes told a story of exhaustion and resignation. The company's policy required him to gain experience in various departments, and this latest transfer placed him in one of the most demanding roles, potentially robbing us of the precious family time we had come to cherish. Freddie's shoulders seemed to slump as he spoke. "Yeah, it's company policy. They want me to gain experience in various places." He tried to comfort Sophia, who was looking up at him with a mix of confusion and sadness. "Daddy, are you not going to play with me anymore?" His voice carried a blend of sadness and resolve as he replied, "I'll do my best to spend as much time with you as possible, Sophia. We'll go to the zoo again soon." His expression was one of deep regret as he gently brushed a strand of hair from our daughter's forehead. Watching this poignant exchange stirred a storm of emotions within me. The tightness in my chest was almost unbearable, a mixture of empathy for Freddie's situation and the looming sense of loss for the time we would miss together as a family. Though Freddie's transfer did not involve a change in salary or relocation, the impact on our daily lives was significant. The prospect of having less time with him filled me with a profound sense of loneliness. Yet the most vulnerable among us was undoubtedly Freddie, who now faced the daunting task of acclimating to a new and challenging environment. The weight of his new responsibilities loomed heavy, overshadowing the comfort of our usual family routines. Please don't push yourself too hard. I was fully aware of Freddie's propensity to dive headfirst into his work, often at the expense of his well-being, and this deeply concerned me. My fears, unfortunately, were not unfounded. Initially, Freddie had managed to carve out time for both family and rest, despite his demanding schedule. However, as the weeks passed, his presence at home began to dwindle drastically. It seemed that his new role demanded not only extended hours but also frequent late-night overtime, leaving him arriving home long after our daughter had already fallen asleep. To compound matters, he was increasingly spending evenings out for drinks with clients and, on top of that, even working on his supposed days off. This new pattern of behavior was alarming. I felt a growing anxiety about his well-being. "Hey, could you take a day off next Sunday? Sophia really misses you, and you've been working so hard lately," I suggested, hoping to ease some of the pressure from his overburdened schedule. Freddie's response was brusque, a sign of the stress and frustration he was feeling. "Who do you think I'm working so hard for? Should I just cancel my client meetings and risk my job?" His tone was sharp, and his eyes held a flicker of resentment. I tried to explain my concern gently. "I didn't mean it like that. I'm just worried about you and how you're managing all this stress." His reaction was dismissive and cold. "That's none of your business. Anyway, make sure you have the money ready for next week's drinking party." His words stung, a stark reminder of how distant and disconnected we had become. The tension between us was palpable, and the strain of his relentless work schedule was taking a toll on both his health and our family dynamics. Seemingly overwhelmed by the crushing weight of his workload, Freddie had transformed into a figure of perpetual irritation, his patience wearing thin with each passing day. His frustration, which once remained hidden beneath a veneer of calm, now spilled out more frequently, and unfortunately, I became the primary target of his discontent. The financial strain was also becoming evident. His lavish spending on client entertainment, which he deemed essential, was starting to erode our savings and affect our household budget. Despite my growing concern, I found myself more worried than angry, clinging to memories of his former kindness and the man I fell in love with. I knew I had to find a way to get him to take a break before he collapsed under the immense pressure. As 6 months passed since his transfer, the situation only worsened. Freddie's presence at home had dwindled to mere moments of rest between his grueling shifts. He was coming home primarily to sleep, leaving little room for family interaction. Sophia, feeling the sting of his absence, began to wear a constant veil of sadness, her once bright eyes now shadowed by a growing loneliness. The emotional strain on both our daughter and me was palpable, and I knew that this untenable situation couldn't continue indefinitely. I was desperately searching for a way to convince Freddie to take some time off, hoping it might restore a semblance of balance to our lives. As if our lives weren't already tangled in a web of mounting difficulties, an unimaginable disaster struck from an unforeseen direction. My mother, who had been bravely enduring a chronic illness for several years, suddenly and unexpectedly passed away while in the hospital. The news hit me with a ferocity that left me paralyzed and gasping for air, as if the very ground had been ripped from beneath me. "No, Mom," I cried out, my voice breaking with raw, unrestrained anguish that felt like a knife cutting through my heart. Having lost my father when I was still young, my mother was my sole surviving parent and a cherished anchor in my life. Her death was an unbearable blow, made all the more agonizing by the fact that I never had the opportunity to say a final farewell or share one last conversation with her. The pain was profound, overwhelming, and left me in a state of profound shock, my heart weighed down by an intense sorrow that seemed to freeze me in place. Amid this unimaginable grief, Freddie's response was shockingly cold and devoid of empathy. As I grappled with the enormity of my loss, he uttered words that felt like a cruel twist of the knife. "Hey, do I have to go to that funeral too?" His indifferent attitude was a stark contrast to the gravity of the situation, and I stared at him in stunned disbelief. My mother may have been a figure he had little personal connection with, but she was still family, and her passing was a significant event that warranted compassion and respect. His reaction, however, was a jarring reflection of his disconnection from the emotional turmoil I was enduring. The lack of any semblance of comfort or sympathy from Freddie was deeply hurtful. Instead of offering solace or support, he focused on his inconveniences and frustrations. "What are you saying? Of course you need to attend. It's a family funeral." I responded, struggling to keep my voice steady and calm, despite the seething anger and sadness churning within me. I tried to convey the importance of the occasion, hoping that he would understand the necessity of his presence. But Freddie's reaction was both infuriating and disheartening. "Don't get mad at me. Ugh, why does this have to happen now?" "I had plans too," he grumbled, his words dripping with irritation and self-pity. His response felt like an insurmountable barrier between us, further isolating me in my grief and amplifying my sense of abandonment. The fact that he was more concerned with the disruption to his schedule than with supporting me during one of the most painful times in my life left me feeling even more alone and distraught. The chasm between us seemed to widen, deepening the emotional strain and highlighting a troubling disconnect that I feared might never be bridged. Despite my stern rebuke, Freddie remained unyieldingly indifferent, leaving me in a state of utter shock. His reaction was a far cry from the compassionate partner I had once known. In our past, he would have instinctively offered comfort, perhaps gently rubbing my back or grieving alongside me in shared sorrow. Yet now his demeanor was marked by dissatisfaction and a palpable lack of empathy. He seemed almost unrecognizable, a stark contrast to the person I had envisioned a future with. As the preparations for my mother's funeral unfolded, Freddie's absence was glaring. He made no effort to assist with the arrangements or offer any support, leaving me to handle everything on my own. On the day of the service, his silence and sullen expression were a constant reminder of how distant he had become. "It's over now, right? I'm heading home first," he announced as the funeral drew to a close. His departure was abrupt, and unfeeling, he made no effort to help with the cleanup and quickly retreated to the sanctuary of our home. Initially, I was baffled by his lack of sensitivity and apparent disregard for the gravity of the situation, but as the day wore on, I found myself too drained to muster any anger. Instead, I was left feeling a profound sense of bewilderment and deep disappointment. Regardless of the stress and demands of his work, his conduct at the funeral was inexcusable. I couldn't help but wonder when my husband had transformed into such a cold and detached individual. With a heavy heart, I focused on completing the cleanup and finding solace in the company of my daughter. "Mom, Sophia will help you," I said, her presence a small but meaningful comfort amidst the chaos. Together, we managed to finish tidying up before I decided to stop by my parents' house. It wasn't far from our home, and I felt a strong urge to linger there a little longer, hoping to find some solace in reminiscing about my mother. As I arrived at my parents' house, carrying the weight of my sorrow, I was met with an unexpected and shocking discovery. The familiarity of the place, which should have offered me a semblance of comfort, instead presented a new layer of bewildering complexity. "Mom, wait a moment," Sophia's sudden exclamation startled me as we arrived at my parents' house. Her face, usually so expressive of joy and curiosity, was now set with an intensity I had never seen before. She sprinted towards the back room with an urgency that made my heart race. I had brought her to visit my mother's home on numerous occasions, yet I had never witnessed such a fervent reaction from her. I quickly followed, my footsteps echoing in the stillness of the house until I reached the back room where Sophia was already busy. She was tugging at the second drawer from the bottom of the old wooden dresser, her little hands working with a sense of purpose that was almost uncanny. As I approached, I saw her holding an old hand mirror, its surface gleaming softly in the dim light. "Mom, Grandma wants you to have this," she said, her voice carrying a mix of solemnity and reverence. I was taken aback, my breath catching in my throat as I took in the sight of the mirror. This was no ordinary object, it was a relic of deep personal significance. My mother had always cherished it dearly, and it was so precious to her that she seldom used it in front of anyone. I had never even known where she kept it hidden. The mere fact that Sophia was holding it in her tiny hands was both surprising and deeply unsettling. "How did you know this mirror was here?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly with a blend of confusion and awe. "And what do you mean? Grandma wanted me to have it." Sophia's eyes were wide, filled with an earnestness that seemed beyond her years. "When Grandma was sleeping earlier," she explained, "she told me that Mom was sad and asked me to give this to you." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, a mix of grief and wonder flooding over me. It was impossible for a child so young to have known about the mirror's significance, and the idea that my mother had somehow communicated this wish through Sophia was both comforting and mystifying. The air in the room grew thick with emotion as I gently took the mirror from Sophia's hands. It felt as if a piece of my mother's essence had been passed to me through this cherished object. I held it close, feeling a deep connection to her despite her absence, as though she was reaching out from beyond to offer a gesture of love and understanding. The mirror, once a symbol of my mother's solitary grace, now became a bridge between her spirit and my grieving heart, offering a glimmer of solace amid my overwhelming sorrow. I couldn't mask my astonishment as Sophia answered my questions with an innocent clarity that was almost unnerving. I decided to test her further, intrigued by the seemingly supernatural nature of her responses. I asked her about the menu for tomorrow's dinner, my thoughts during the funeral, and even some private musings I had kept to myself. To my amazement, she answered each question with precise accuracy, revealing details she had no possible way of knowing. It was as if my daughter possessed a mysterious ability to peer into the innermost thoughts and secrets of those around her. "Wow, that's amazing," I marveled, gently stroking her head as I tried to reconcile the reality of her abilities with my previous disbelief. I had always considered the notion of such extraordinary gifts to be mere fantasy, the stuff of fairy tales and myths. Yet here was my daughter, demonstrating a power that defied all logical explanation. Despite my amazement, Sophia stood there with a hand proudly resting on her hip, her face beaming with a mix of pride and self-assurance. "That's right. Sophia knows about Dad too," she declared with an air of confident revelation. "What do you mean?" I asked, a knot of unease forming in my stomach as I sensed that her revelation might be leading to something far more troubling. What she proceeded to tell me was nothing short of astonishing and deeply troubling. A few weeks after my mother's funeral, on a Sunday morning while I was visiting a friend with Sophia, Freddie had exhibited behavior that now seemed profoundly suspect in light of her revelations. When I mentioned our plans to Freddie, who was preparing to head off to work, his reaction was immediate and striking. He halted abruptly, his face contorting into a frown that conveyed genuine concern and discomfort. "Really? Oh no, I'm off that day. That's too bad," he said, his voice betraying an artificial note that struck me as insincere. As I quietly smiled to myself, a small but telling gesture of my growing awareness, I realized how disingenuous Freddie had been. The realization of his true feelings, coupled with the knowledge of his actions, extinguished any remnants of affection I had harbored for him. The facade of our marriage, once a source of comfort and security, now seemed like a cruel illusion, and the trust I had placed in him felt irrevocably shattered. On that Sunday, I left home with Sophia and deliberately killed time for about an hour before returning. When we arrived back, I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. Sophia's earlier revelation had left me feeling uneasy, but her confident assertion that Freddie was involved with another woman compelled me to investigate further. "Dad, he's over there," she said, pointing toward the garage with the shutter still down. With a deep breath to steady my nerves, I walked up to the garage door and gently knocked on the shutter. "Freddie, I know you're in there. Open up," I called out, my voice tinged with determination. After a tense moment of silence, the shutter creaked open, revealing Freddie's startled face. His expression shifted from shock to a strained attempt at composure as he stammered, "Hey, Charlotte. What brings you here?" I stepped into the garage, and my heart sank as I took in the sight before me. Scattered across the floor were several expensive bottles of liquor, their labels glinting in the dim light. It was clear that these were not for casual consumption but were likely intended for his client meetings. A wave of unease washed over me as I took in the scene. "What is this?" I asked, my voice steady but laced with mounting tension. Freddie's response was an awkward jumble of words, his face a portrait of discomfort. "No, it's just." For work he fumbled with his explanation, clearly struggling to find a convincing justification. My eyes narrowed as I pressed on. "Sophia told me you were here with a woman. Is that true?" At my question, Freddie's complexion turned a ghostly white. His demeanor became increasingly agitated, as if he were on the verge of bolting. He fidgeted nervously, his eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. No, that's not true," he protested, but his voice lacked conviction, revealing the cracks in his facade. I pressed further, the weight of Sophia's revelation heavy on my shoulders. "Sophia even told me that you had dinner with her on the day of my mother's funeral." My words cut through the air like a knife, and Freddie's face registered a flash of panic. The room was thick with the tension of unspoken truths and unresolved conflicts, and I felt a chilling realization settling in. The garage, once a place of ordinary storage, now felt like a chamber of secrets, holding the key to unraveling the painful mystery of Freddie's betrayal. Freddie's eyes widened in terror as he processed the gravity of the situation, his face contorting into a mask of horror. He sank to the floor, his entire body shaking with a mix of fear and remorse. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done it. I'm truly sorry," he repeated over and over, his voice trembling with desperation. Despite his anguished apologies, the damage was irreparable. The betrayal was too deep, and the fact that he had chosen to be with another woman on the day of my mother's funeral only compounded the pain. His pleas fell on deaf ears as I struggled to contain the surge of emotions welling up inside me. "It's too late to apologize now. It's over," I said firmly, my voice steady but laden with finality. The decision was made, and the resolve to end our marriage was unshakable. I had already begun the process of consulting with a lawyer, meticulously preparing all the necessary documents for a divorce. The revelation of Freddie's affair, coupled with his blatant disregard for our family during such a critical time, had left me with no choice. My daughter's seemingly uncanny ability to unveil the truth had inadvertently exposed the reality of Freddie's deceit. It was a painful yet necessary catalyst for change. I had to ensure a stable and positive future for Sophia, free from the shadows of betrayal and dishonesty. As I took steps to secure our future and prepare for a new beginning, the weight of the past began to lift, albeit slowly. Freddie's actions were inexcusable, and I knew that moving forward was not just a matter of personal healing but a crucial step for the well-being of my daughter. The journey ahead would be challenging, but it was one I had to undertake for the sake of rebuilding our lives and forging a path of integrity and honesty. As we reach the end of this emotional journey, it's clear that life's challenges can often reveal deep truths and lead to transformative changes. We've explored a powerful story of betrayal, personal growth, and the quest for a fresh start. Through these intense experiences, we've witnessed how secrets can unravel and how difficult decisions become necessary for moving forward with dignity and hope. Now we want to hear from you. What have you learned from this story? How can these lessons shape your approach to dealing with personal challenges and maintaining integrity in your relationships? Share one insight or lesson you plan to incorporate into your life in the comments below. If this video resonated with you, please take a moment to leave your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay updated with more content that inspires and empowers. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to connecting with you in the comments.